Welcome to our Savvy series. I'm Catherine Magana here with Rachel Ivanovich, and today we're going to have a conversation about inheritances. Over the years, we've met with a lot of women and helped them with financial planning and their retirement plans. And interestingly enough, over the years, occasionally there's been inheritances that are part of the plan. And when we do financial planning, we actually factor that in if they know or if that's something that they want to include. But the reality is sometimes a lot of women don't know if they're going to get an inheritance or if they expect it maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years later and they get it now. So there is some planning and things that have to go into place. But what's interesting is based on kind of what we're seeing based on research, it looks like between 2021 and 2025, there's going to be over $84 million in wealth that's going to be transferred. So there's a lot of money that's out there and a lot of movement, and there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to inheritances.
And women are becoming more involved, too, with these wealth transfers, and they're going to be taking on a lot of responsibility for managing their personal wealth in the future. And I found an article that says, according to Boston College's Center on Wealth and Philanthropy, it's estimated women will inherit 70% of the great wealth transfer, which is the transfer of wealth from baby boomers to their children over the next 2 decades. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
And so it says this transfer means that women could possess and control 2/3 of the nation's wealth by 2030. I thought that was...
I think we have some work ahead of us. We're big advocates
do.
about helping women learn about money and investing. We do a lot of workshops and events, but I definitely feel like there's a big transition between, wealth transfer, retirement. I mean, there's a lot of change that's happening right in front of us.
And I think being educated will give women confidence, and having a plan in advance is so key so that you feel empowered once that wealth transfer actually happens.
So one of the things that comes up is sometimes as we're talking with clients that they may know that something's coming down the line, but they have no idea what. And so that's the hard part is, do you plan for it? Do you incorporate it? And it really just depends on the family dynamics and what you know. Because the reality is if you don't know what the finances are and you're expecting it and if it's not going to be there, then you really need a plan. Your plan needs to be very solid. And so I think if your family is open to it, having conversations early, I think helps.
I think that's really smart.
But sometimes there's also the cultural differences, or perhaps, I know sometimes even for myself growing up, we didn't really talk about money. And so I think being open and having those family discussions is really important.
Because if you are going to find yourself on the receiving end of a wealth transfer, I think that there's really some considerations, and I know we're going to go into more depth here, but some of the considerations and having that conversation with family ahead of time is, what is the size of the transfer going to be? I mean, is it going to be a substantial amount, or are we talking something small? What type of transfer is it? Is it real estate? Is it IRAs? What type of assets are we looking at? Because there are definitely a lot of different considerations that you should keep in mind, such as, what are my different planning options? Because if you inherit a house versus an IRA, I mean, there's some tax consequences.
I was going to say a lot of tax consequences. I know we're going to do a segment just on taxes later, but that's a really important part. Is there's some step up in basis, or is there, what are you getting? And then there's always for IRAs or inherited IRAs, if there's the rules of taking money out over certain periods of time.
Yeah, what are my responsibilities? What am I going to be responsible for in regards to this gift that I'm getting?
Or also the other part is if you're the executor of a trust or the assets, that's a whole nother consideration.
So I think assembling a good team is a really good step. Yeah. Get educated. And so find a team of advisors. You may want an attorney, definitely a financial advisor. You're going to want to work with somebody who you trust and feel comfortable talking with, because you want to make sure that this person asks you lots of questions about your goals and your objectives, so they really get to know you and what's most important to you.
And it's going to take time. It's not one of these things that happens quickly. I mean, sometimes you're going through the process. Maybe you're grieving still, and there's other things that are happening, and there's other family members.
We've had several clients who have inherited substantial sums recently, and it's hard. And I think that planning ahead of time and like you said, having those conversations beforehand, and making sure that your parents or whoever will be passing on the wealth, they actually talk with you about it.
And then there's the other side of it is we're saying, everything's in order and everything's in place with the estate, but there's also times where what we're finding is the estate maybe wasn't in order, and there's, no will or trust, or there's, so it can be a little more challenging trying to navigate through some of those obstacles that you have in front of you.
Yeah, therefore, like I said, make sure you find somebody, and maybe even you find somebody before you need them and start having those conversations, because they can give you some good questions, some good talking points to talk with your family about.
And then the other thing is depending on if your estate's in order, are your wills and trust and everything in place? And if not, obviously if you are getting a lump sum of money or some inheritances, it might make sense for you to make sure you have your estate in order as well.
I think one of the things that women need to keep in mind is, women are living longer and longer. Our life expectancy typically is on average 5 years longer than men. And oftentimes the inheritance might not be from a parent, but it might be from a spouse.
Yeah.
And therefore having, that plan in place, that survivor plan in place is really key. And a lot of women are concerned about stretching out their funds, and they're afraid of running out of money. So, making sure those conversations are had while, your spouse is still alive is, I think, really, really important.
We were working with a client a few years ago, and she actually had inherited some money. She, in the past, had just, worked and lived comfortably, but she then came across a large sum of money. Both her parents actually passed away within a week. Wow. And then, so we had, I met with her for many times, and we did some planning and talked about her goals and future, and she still continued to work. But we really laid out a plan for her, and so she would have enough and it would last. And she wasn't a big spender. She wasn't going out buying all these new cars and houses and stuff like that. But she did take one, trip. It wasn't lavish. It was, it was manageable. But then a short period of time later, she ended up getting really ill. So she ended up, fortunately, she passed away. And then my heart was broken because I was like, oh my gosh, like she
did everything right.
She did everything right. Like she didn't wasn't like, hey, I'm going to go spend this and that. She was really mindful and thankful that she had this money. And then, so, yes, you want to plan, but you also want to live life. And I mean, it's a combination. And I think, she did do the right thing. She was set up to have enough to last her for, we expect people to live because, for a very long time. Yeah. Sometimes on the other side, people are living till 95, 100 years old. So it just really depends. And she was young. She was in her late 50s. And so it's just one of those things that, you plan for the future, be thankful for your blessings, and but life does happen. You also have to enjoy life too.
I mean, we do. We have a client even coming in today whose husband passed away, and they didn't really have a plan, and he'd been the one taking care of all the finances all these years. And she said, I wish I would have paid more attention to the finances when he was still alive. But now she's meeting with us. She's making a plan for her future. She sold her house and she's starting a new chapter. And so I think that's really exciting. Definitely working with the right professionals will set her up for a really fun, next season of her life.
And as we're going through this with these clients, it's interesting how much some of these women want to learn. Like, I really want to know. I mean,
yes.
They don't need to know every little detail, and but they want to know enough to say, okay, what is it? What is this, and how does this work? And
it's a pretty common trend, I think. So many women they're in their 70s and 80s and saying, I want to learn about money, and they're excited about it. So I think that's great. You're never too old to learn new things.
Exactly. Well, that's a wrap for today's Savvy series. We'll continue the conversation on this and dig a little deeper on taxes and some other areas on getting organized with your finances.
Inherited IRAs.
Yes, inherited IRAs, and there's a lot of nuances.
But
thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to spend some time with us, we're happy to set up a consultation or an initial call. You can reach us at 760-692-5700. And remember, Savvy up. Please stay tuned for important regulatory disclosures.
Savvy Women Wealth Management is an SEC registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry and how we may be able to assist. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Tax considerations presented may not be appropriate for every individual circumstance. A tax professional should be consulted before making any decisions about your tax liability.